Extra, extra. Read all about it. The Aether Entertainer's newest edition is out now. Come learn about Uldah's premier fight club. Join us for the review of Cactuar Cantina's Nopalis Moonshine.
Um, Pardon me, you seem to be advertising a magazine, I'm guessing, but you don't seem to be holding anything.
Oh, we don't have physical copies. We try to save on paper.
How am I supposed to read your magazine then?
Oh, it's easy. Pull out your tombstone. Okay,
Okay.
now go here,
Uh-huh.
push this,
Mm-hmm.
and there you go.
Oh.
Aether Entertainer.
Oh, wow. So, a fully digital magazine? Oh, Scribe, Row, Husky by the Geek? I love those guys. This is so cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Huh. Actually, this is really cool. Would you mind coming by my cafe later? I'd love to learn more about this. This is interesting.
Sure thing.
Hello once again, friend. It's been a bit since I've seen you, though I suppose things in Tyrol have been a bit more hectic than any of us could have expected. Here, let me get you your usual, and why don't you take a seat? As always, your timing is impeccable. I have invited a special guest to the cafe, a team member of a very unique magazine called the Aether Entertainer. They are a group of people that, much like myself, enjoy showcasing various adventurers. When I first learned of their publication, I was so fascinated by it. To see other people wanting to lift up our community and not only highlight interesting individuals, but also hold large events to bring people together, truly made my heart sing. Now I get to have Scarletta Vendetta, hardworking event hostess and editor-in-chief of the Aether Entertainer magazine, come by the cafe to tell us all about their fantastic publication. So here's your drink, get nice and cozy, and let's wait for our wonderful guest to arrive. Welcome in, Vendetta. I'm delighted to have you here today. Where are you joining us from?
I'm on a little farm out in central Indiana.
Oh, wow. Like with cows and chickens?
Cows for sure, horses, and there might be some chickens in the back. I don't own that part of the farm.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Now, as I ask every guest, what are you drinking while you're with us today?
I'm drinking my signature cup of black coffee. It's actually a brand called Flip Coffee, which is specifically an online brand that supports rescue dogs.
Oh, that's really neat. Do you have any dogs IRL?
I do. I have a dog and I have two cats.
Aw, I have one cat. He's a little terror, but I love him. But I feel like that's cats in a nutshell.
Sounds like you have a cat.
Indeed. I myself have a nice caramel iced latte.
Nice.
So I have to ask, before we get started, Scarletta Vendetta, that is a very interesting name. Where does that come from?
So my gaming handle has been Scarlet for a long time. I pulled that from the Clue board game Miss Scarlet, which is the red piece, which is also my favorite color. But creating my character in Final Fantasy was the first time I ever really needed to consider a last name. So I was sitting on the character creation screen with the Scarlet as the first name, trying to figure out what the heck my last name would be. And I had the movie case for V for Vendetta on my desk. So I just put my last name as Vendetta, and then I made Scarlet into Scarletta for the rhyme.
I love and appreciate how organic that is.
It's super cool and not lame at all.
Oh no, I mean I really like it. Okay. But obsessing about your neat name aside. Now, obviously, we're here to talk about Final Fantasy.
So how did you come to the franchise? Is 14 your first Final Fantasy game?
I guess that depends on who you ask. So my first Final Fantasy game was Final Fantasy X2. So if you consider that a Final Fantasy game, which I've been told by some that it's not, then 14 would be my first Final Fantasy game. I'm not a traditional fan of the franchise. I've never played any of the core games. I did enjoy X2 as a kid, but yeah, that's not really what brought me here.
I personally do consider Final Fantasy X2 to be a Final Fantasy game. I know that people have very mixed feelings about it. I've actually had the song "What Can I Do for You" going through my head all weekend, funny enough. So the fact that you mentioned that is great. But that being said, if Final Fantasy X-2 isn't what brought you to 14, then how did you get involved in Final Fantasy 14?
It was actually through an ex-partner. We started playing together back in 2.0, and he quit ages ago, and I just kept playing because I love the game.
I just realized the song is not called "What Can I Do for You." That's part of the lyrics. It's actually called "Real Emotion." I feel like some 10-2 fans probably were like, "Wait a minute." But that aside, so you said that an ex-partner brought you to the game. What was it like starting out? Talking about them as little as possible, because I don't want to dig into any of that. What was your experience like when you first started 14, especially as someone who isn't familiar with the franchise?
Ooh, okay. Well, keep in mind this is back in 2013, so the game itself was super different back then. On top of it being like one of my only Final Fantasy games I'd ever played, it was also the first MMO I'd ever played. I didn't play WoW or anything like that, so I had a lot of learning to do as far as what the heck is this game. But at first, I was super addicted to it. Like, like, like it's my first MMO. I went hard MMO addiction. Really poured the hours into the game at first, and I became obsessed with it. Became obsessed with the content, especially like Titan EX at the start was just some. I would just run that like the same, pattern over and over again for weeks. It felt like. Started out, I actually just worked up to be a raider because I was obsessed with the creatures and the fights of the game. So maybe for the first 6 years of me playing Final Fantasy, I was strictly like a hardcore raider or maybe semi-hardcore raider, and I only played to defeat content.
You said something interesting. You said that you became obsessed with the creatures of 14. Can you elaborate on that? Like, are there any specific creatures in the franchise that you've fallen in love with?
Oof, well, Kefka. Kefka is my favorite creature in the game. But I also love Titan, and I mean most of the things would be like raid bosses, I guess. I really specifically like the Alexander raid tier. So any of those like gobbies and robots, I don't know, the fights. The fights are awesome. And especially early on, when we were getting mechanics that were fresh. Because right now I feel like game state, a lot of the mechanics can be reused. But Melusine during Heaven's Ward was one of the favorite creatures that I had. And again, Titan.
And has playing 14 since 2013 encouraged you to try any of the other Final Fantasy games, or are there any that you're considering giving a shot?
So I replayed X2. I have this struggle personally where if I don't have a nostalgia for the game, it's hard for me to go back and play a vintage game. I really like good looking games. I think Final Fantasy, especially in 2013, was one of the better looking MMOs that you could get into. Ultimately, I think that's why I picked Final Fantasy over, like, say, Elder Scrolls. Is the game looked great. So I have kind of a hesitation going back. I was interested to play Final Fantasy 15, but I actually was too busy with my raid schedule and things in 14 to really get into any of like the releases afterwards. To be honest, I'm pretty much obsessed with 14. I don't know that I've really been hooked on any other Final Fantasy games, as taboo as that might be to say.
So, what about 16 then?
I've watched streams, and that's about as close to the game as I get. I just don't have that kind of time. Like, I don't have that kind of time. I'm sorry.
I'm guessing then outside of 14, you stay pretty busy.
The magazine definitely keeps me busy. But I have other hobbies as well, like working with the dog. We're working on becoming a therapy dog team. So that takes up a lot of my time outside of the game as well.
Are you also helping out a lot on that farm then, or are you not expected to help with all of the farm work and all that?
I'm not really related to the farm per se. I live here on the farmland, and I pay to live on the farmland, but I'm not the farmer, if you will. I'm actually a nurse by profession.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
That's so neat. I it's really interesting because I actually keep coming across people who are nurses who play Final Fantasy 14, and it's a coincidence that I never expected, but it seems to keep popping up.
I have met a few other nurses, and like EMTs too, playing 14.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, in fact, previous guests I've had on here are nurses, and actually, the second in command of my free company is a former EMT who's currently in nursing school.
Nice. Nursing school, the hardest thing you'll ever do.
That's what I've heard. I've heard it's very intense, and more power to anyone in or who has been through nursing school.
I said nursing school is harder than being a nurse.
That is what I've heard. Though it does make me curious about what draws people in the profession to 14. Though maybe it's the fact that as an MMORPG, you can kind of slip in and out of it between shifts. I don't know. That's just me guessing.
I feel like with 14 they really designed it to be so that you could be a working professional and still play the game and still keep up with it because of the weekly cap and stuff. It's less grindy than 11, or so I've been told. I didn't play 11. But the other thing is, I think you should ask these EMTs and nurses, like, what class do they play? Because I played Scholar. I'm a nurse. I played Scholar like for the past 10 years. So
You know that is interesting to ask then too is are they healers? And I feel part of me feels like asking that might be like biased or making an assumption, but wouldn't it be interesting though if that was the case?
I think I would like to know the statistics on that. Like, do they play DPS instead just to like escape from their life as a healer? Or are they like me and they kind of embody it also in their character?
You know what? If you're listening to this on YouTube or anywhere else you can leave a comment and you happen to be a nurse or doctor or EMT, let us know what class you play. Because now I think that Vendetta and I are both very curious. But we'll move on. Okay, we got a little sidetracked. So, one thing we're going to discuss later is your activities as a journalist. But have you always been keen on journalism and interviewing others? Or is it something that you've kind of stumbled into when playing 14?
I honestly, other than like English that they make you take in nursing school, I have no professional experience as a writer. I never did journalism before I started the Aether Entertainer. I never had a goal to do journalism for Final Fantasy. It was completely an organic experience.
You know, that's actually a common theme I've seen is, for instance, I've asked other people who do like journalism or very specific things like acting or glam related in 14 if that's something that they've always been into. And in a lot of cases, people are like, no, I really don't have any background with it. I just do it in 14.
Yeah, I mean that's the case with the Aether Entertainer. I guess now I would consider myself probably a relatively experienced journalist, having done this for nearly 4 years. But prior to starting out, I learned everything from just bumps on the road.
Same here. Before Coffee and Carbuncles, I've not done any journalism work. So if I was asking that to myself, I'd have the same answer. It's like, no, you kind of stumble into it. Talking with people and getting to know more about them is really fun.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of satisfaction from the body of work that we've created. And of course, it's not just me anymore. I have a really big team. But starting out, it was just me working off of a card site, and it's created a passion that I didn't know that I had.
It's awesome that you can use 14 as a way to explore that.
Yeah, creative writing has been a powerful outlet, even for me as a kid. I would always write stories like in a notebook. And so this just kind of came naturally as just something that I ended up doing without meaning for it to become anything real, you know?
I'm curious, have you done like role play and stuff before 14? Because, for instance, before 14, I really enjoyed creative writing, doing a lot of forum role play and stuff like tabletop D&D type stuff.
Maybe as a kid, I was never put in the right community because I don't have those experiences. I was in drama class in high school, like all through high school, I was in drama club and I was in plays, usually as a background character because I have a lot of anxiety when it comes to talking to people. And I'll get into that a little bit later about how that affected the Aether Entertainer because without my anxiety, I would have never created the Aether Entertainer. So there's been a lot of like setbacks for me in a social standpoint. Um, with everything, but I mean, I have a background in high school theater, and I guess that's where my creative writing came from.
That makes me curious. Do you find you are more or less social in 14 compared to IRL? Because I find that the more I interview people, I actually have started becoming more social because Coffee and Carbuncles has kind of forced me to have to be more social. Has doing this magazine been the same for you?
Oh yeah. Oh, oh yeah. Um, I am not a very social person in real life. I would say that that's one of my biggest challenges on the day to day is interacting with other people with the level of anxiety that I have. Even like coming on to the show was like I had to work up to it, as you know. Um, But yeah, in 14 with the Aether Entertainer, I guess I'm forced into these positions and it's been really healthy for me, I think, because I am able to do things that I didn't think that I could because I'm forced into it because I care about, the Aether Entertainer. So like I might have to talk to somebody that or go on an interview that maybe I wouldn't have had to do otherwise. And I just have to rise to the occasion because I'm leading the magazine and that's what's expected. Also just like in my professional life, if I'm not confident about something, how are any patients gonna trust in me? So I have to kind of have this, like, air of confidence even when I don't feel it, even when I feel scared or anxious. I can't let on that I feel scared or anxious. I have to just kinda roll with it. And I think that being put into a position and then rising to the occasion, it makes you just a little more confident in general when talking to people. So, definitely, I would say online, I excel much better in the social aspect. And that doesn't translate so well into real life for me at this point.
That makes me curious as well because we had talked outside of this interview about you coming to Gateway Fate in October in St. Louis. And you had discussed considering paneling there and doing some very social stuff. Is it easier because it's a 14 focused environment, or is there still this aspect of you're trying to make yourself get out of your comfort zone by going there and doing that?
I think when you're passionate about something and you know that something like a panel could be good for your magazine, I think that it pushes you to do something that you wouldn't normally be comfortable doing. So because I care about, showcasing the community and I care about the magazine, I'm going to put myself out there. Um, I'm going to prepare a lot for it to try to reduce anxiety, but ultimately I'm just going to take it like you said, I'm just going to do it.
Well, as I told you before this interview, I will be there and fully supporting you.
Yeah, we have a lot of plans for Gateway Fate. We're gonna have a lot of staff come out supposedly, and I mean, I'm hyping myself up to like meet these people that I've been working with. That's a whole another thing is like meeting them in real life, and I don't know. I'm hoping that my social prowess in game that I've been trying to cultivate over 4 years helps me with this, but we'll see.
From my experience at Gateway Fate last year, it was my first 14 convention and I was so nervous and I was like I'm going to meet all these people that I've only ever talked to online in person. But then when we actually started talking, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, especially when I started talking with Fruity Snacks, though to be fair, he's a pretty easy guy to talk to. but also I met a lot of the team from lore lines, and when you already have that established sense of community hanging over the, it becomes a lot easier to talk with people there because you know that as opposed to IRL, I say that even though it's obviously a convention in real life, but it's like if I went to my job and I started talking about 14, some people's eyes would glaze over, some people would look deeply confused, and maybe like one person would be interested. Whereas at something like Gateway Fate, if I talk about 14, well, everyone's there to talk about 14. And so you kind of already know that there's going to be a lot less judgment when you say things, and that makes it a lot easier to come out of your shell.
I can see that. I went to Gateway Fate and I kind of succumbed to my anxiety and I was more of a watcher than a doer. So I mean I kind of did all the panels and I watched, but I didn't introduce myself to anybody. I just kind of observed and took it all in. I'm hoping that this year I'll be a lot different and then I'll sit at the table, but we'll see.
I believe in you. You got this.
Doing this interview will help.
I hope. I really genuinely hope. So, is it hard juggling the work you do for the Aether Entertainer with what also sounds like pretty busy outside of 14 life?
Yes it is. To put it simply. I'm pretty much always over busy and I have a problem saying yes to every collab and every project that somebody wants to do to a fatal flaw kind of point. I'm so busy. As I said, I don't have time for other games too much. I don't have time for I work and then I do planning for Final Fantasy. As far as the other staff though, and I mentioned I have a big staff, they don't have any minimum amount of work that they have to do. So I don't think that my busyness necessarily translates to the rest of the people who work on AE. I actually haven't written for the magazine in a couple of months because they've been so busy writing. So I mean, they help out a lot with how busy I am too.
That's good. I mean, I'm glad that you have a large staff that can share that burden.
Yeah, I have 60 contributors in our Discord. I just checked. So they hop in at any time. They can write, edit, or design, take photos for the magazines. I think this month is the first time I've written anything in like 3 months because we just have a lot of writers who wanted to submit articles.
That's great. I mean, that certainly beats having a drought.
Yeah, I think the drought for us, it actually hasn't happened last year. I was expecting to have less content to write about during the holidays because people would take time off of the game. But that really didn't happen. There's more events in game and stuff during the holidays, and there's actually a lot of things in 14 where they host like specific events for people who don't have families to go to around Thanksgiving and Christmas time too. So we wrote about a lot of those types of things.
In part two of this interview, I want to talk all about that because I'm definitely curious to hear about the types of things you guys look for and the kind of the kind of things that really grab you and inspire you guys to write the various topics for each volume of the magazine. But for now, we're going to take a brief break, let ourselves rest, and when we get back, we are going to dive headfirst into talking about the Aether Entertainer. So we'll be right back. All right. We had a nice break. We got up, stretched, and now we're back. I hope you got yourself a nice refill on your beverage. and are all set to learn more about the wonderful magazine that Vendetta helps produce. So, for those that are tuning in and aren't familiar with the publication, Vendetta, how would you describe the Aether Entertainer? I know the main product people see is the magazine, but I feel there's a lot more to it than just that.
Oh man. Well, it's definitely more than just a publication. Our goal would be to create a positive social change within the game of Final Fantasy XIV. Our slogan is social change begins with how we interact with each other. I heard that somewhere, I don't know, sometime in 2023. And I basically built an entire magazine around that because at the time I was dealing with some toxicity in the community that I was in. And I think that, well, there's no secret that there's toxicity in all corners of the Final Fantasy community, at least a little bit. And so every time we put out a magazine, I want to highlight kindness, acceptance, the positive accomplishments of the community. So it's a bigger goal than just putting out a magazine for views.
And what I enjoy, I know I said it before the interview, but I feel like Aether Entertainer, not just as a magazine, but as an organization, as a concept, has very similar goals to what I want to do with this podcast. And it's one of the reasons that your magazine and your entire team fascinates me so much is because I enjoy this wave of positivity, this idea of let's take the good and the neat things about the community and let's spotlight and let's amplify that as much as possible. And I absolutely love that idea.
I mean, so as I started as a raider in the game, and I was so compartmentalized to the raiding scene for years that I didn't even know what else was in the game, community wise. And then I stumbled upon venues, and that just blew my mind. It just blew my mind. I couldn't believe what people were doing with this game, and I had this mindset before of like, just logging in and grinding and raiding and playing the game the way that I think traditionally people would play an MMO. But then when I discovered the venue scene and what people were doing and the extra lengths that people would go to create an immersive experience in 14, that's what inspired me to start highlighting the things that people were doing. And then as I started publishing, I started discovering more and more of this in the community, and that's ultimately where how I got to where we're at now with it is just seeking. And I don't know, now I would say that I have a lot of ground coverage on what's happening in the community, but back then it was such a shock to realize what macro dancing is and what bards can do, and the level of immersive experiences and theater that these venues put on is crazy.
The first time I saw someone doing theater in 14, I felt like my entire concept of what Final Fantasy 14 was as both a game and a community was just completely turned upside down because someone was like, "Yeah, and this group does Shakespeare." And I'm like, "What do you mean they do Shakespeare?" And they're like, "No, really, they do Shakespeare in 14." And that just seemed like such an impossibility to me because a lot like you with raiding, my idea of 14 was we're going to go to the place and kill the thing. And we might look really good doing it. And that essentially was 14 to me in a nutshell. And then I saw people do theater in 14, and it's like the ceiling for what I thought was possible with this game just became so much higher.
I mean, I absolutely relate to that. Nowadays, I don't raid at all. I don't hardly do any content other than to like keep up with the current expansion. I'm into Dawn Trail, but part of that is just so that I can keep up with the news and things that are happening in the game now from a publishing standpoint. It absolutely changed the way that I view the game, and I think that's also I would contribute a lot of to the longevity of why I've been playing so long. I have like 22,000 hours in Final Fantasy 14 as a player.
That, and not to sound like I don't want to sound like some angry old man or anything, but that's part of my issue when people say that there's nothing to do in 14. I'm like, then hit Party Finder and look at the like 30 different venue ads that are in front of you when you go there. and pick one, pick two, pick six.
I've certainly changed the primary community that I'm a part of over my tenure in 14. So I mean, if you ever are tired of one thing that you're doing, you could always just hop into. There's so much to do. Go raid. Go do Baja. Go RP. I became a bard, so now I play in a bard band. There's just so much to do that you don't have to quit 14 because of.
Exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do believe that between patches, we have obvious content drought. And if you're doing 14 purely for the content that the creators put in the game, I understand the sentiment of there's nothing to do, because in that regard, they're right. However, I don't think that translates to there's nothing to do within the 14 community, because I feel like there is always something that you could go experience in the 14 community. Now, whether you want to experience that or not is a very personal thing and up to the individual, obviously.
Yeah, I think. Well, so anymore, I'm playing 14 from a social standpoint, right? I mean, I think that as a raider, I was also playing 14 for the social aspect. We had a raid team and a free company, and if you're like me, and I have anxiety. So if you're like me and you're playing 14 as your primary social outlet, then there's plenty to do. If you're playing it as a pastime because you like to game, then maybe you have some grievances with the content release system. But I don't relate to that, because even when I was a raider, I was playing for the social aspect in the team, the raid team.
Right. So, in regards to Aether Entertainer, how did the magazine start? Because you said previously that you had been doing journalism in 14 for about 4 years, but it was my understanding that the magazine itself started last year.
Yes, that's a long story. I will try to sum up as best I can. So at the tail end of 2021, my raid team split up, and I was looking for another social outlet in the game. I wasn't really motivated to join a raid team, and so I started going to venues in the Party Finder. I'd never been to one before, and I never RP'd before. I didn't have a character. I don't know if the venue I went to at first was really even an RP immersive venue or not, but I remember going and just sitting and watching people. And I started just going to different ones because I wanted to see I was really impressed by what people were doing. There's like a bar service and stuff, and I'd never seen that before. So I continued going to venues, not because I knew how to interact, but because I just wanted to watch and see what people were doing. I got inspired to try to make a character, like a card with my background and character information, so that I could maybe have a conversation. I definitely wanted to order drinks at the bar because I felt like that was the right thing to do. Again, at the time, I had no idea about RP etiquette. I was just kind of there, a raider, there. And I became fascinated by Card as a website because that is what most people use in venues for like menus and things, and it's free to a point. So I started playing with Card, and anxiety behold me. I started just writing like a journal, but in the Card website, I would write like a diary, and I would take some screenshots of the places I went, and I would attach it to my diary. The card was a personal one that I would just keep, and I had like diary entries from all of these venues I had been stalking, and not interacting with. One day, I was at a venue doing just that, and somebody approached me. Did my typical thing, walked in, ordered a black coffee, sat down /read. I even made a macro /read so that I could read longer. She approached me and asked me what I was reading. Oh God, was not like ready for that conversation. But I just hit her with I'm not reading, I'm writing in my journal. And she said, "What are you writing?" So, well, I'm writing about the experiences I have at venues. Says, "That's really cool. Can I see it?" And I remember I turned that card link public to share with her. And she, like, out of character, was like, "This is really cool." Um, and I hooked her up with a read emote at the end, and she ended up being my first partner at the Aether Entertainer. Her name was Sumaira Hara of Gilgamesh. And she inspired me to start posting that journal link in the Party Finder. She says this is like Entertainment Weekly, like that magazine, like in real life Entertainment Weekly. So we decided that we wanted to go with an entertainment or entertainer sort of title for it as a journal. We settled on Aether because I thought it sounded more like entertainment. I don't know. I thought it went off the tongue well. And also at the time that Aether Entertainer started, there was no data center travel. So we were restricted only to covering stuff on Aether. Shortly after that, we gained two other staff members, and then we had one that would like to interview and one that did nice G poses. So from there, we really kicked off as a card site. At this point, everything was still roleplay, all in character on a card site. And we started publishing this in the Party Finder bi-weekly. For about a year and a half, we actually did it that way. The demands of the publication were a lot. I didn't really have a foundation or organization for publishing. It was very casual. And I decided that it was a little too much, and I quit in May 2023 of doing the card site. I was going to go back to rating. I don't know. I just kind of was taking a different direction or something. And somebody else decided to make a magazine in the game. And I thought, well, this is great. I'll come back. I'll get to write, but I won't be the head. I won't have all this responsibility. So I signed on to this other magazine. And I learned a lot from them. They had great graphics. They were seeking higher value contacts with more followers, to get more eyes on the magazine. They had this whole marketing system. And it was so different than what the card Aether Entertainer had been. It was actually so different to the point where it was a little bit unsatisfying, because card Aether Entertainer, we covered small venues and people at an RP level. We weren't looking for real big creators. And there's a humbleness to that I was really missing from this other magazine. Turns out that magazine didn't even last because the creator of it just pulled it off the shelves randomly without telling anyone. Completely left the whole staff up in the air. So I took what contacts we had from that magazine, such as Sepharheim and Chili Farmer, people like that were slotted to have articles in that mag. I took them and I said, let's recreate what Aether Entertainer could be. I'm sorry, this is a little bit long-winded. But in January 2024, we rebranded to a magazine, and we said, let's cover both RP, small venues, and big content creators like Chili Farmer and Sepharheim. And that's the product that we have today. It's been about a little over a year since we reissued the Aether Entertainer, and we've had more success with this style than we had at the other magazine and with the card site.
I am over here just actually fanboying a little because I adore that you went from this very private blog to having interviews with, voice actors from the game proper. And just hearing about that evolution and that journey is amazing.
Yeah, the voice actor interviews. That was a huge milestone for us. In June, we had our first voice actor interview with Saint Briar. And I just never expected to get a contact of that level. Never in my life did I think that I would be so privileged to be able to interview. I mean, I didn't think I was going to be privileged to interview Sepharheim or Chili Farmer or a voice actor from the game. It's really just it mind boggles me. I haven't been a fan of Final Fantasy 14 for so long. But we were very privileged to get that interview, and then we got another one. And then it almost feels like the interviews compile on each other. The more big interviews we get, the more eyes we get, and then the more people who are willing to talk to us.
That is just awesome. Now, I would like to ask a bit more serious question in regards to the Aether Entertainer. In an era where we're told that print media is either dying or already dead, and there's this heavy emphasis on videos, what makes you all keep Aether Entertainer as a magazine compared to, say, a YouTube or a Twitch channel?
I would say, the Aether Entertainer didn't start it with the intent of becoming a content creator. It was a private journal, so I think that the Aether Entertainer remains in print media because of my personal passions as a creative writer. I also met a large portion of this community that shares that same passion. So it really had nothing to do with us seeking views. It was more of a outlet for our staff. And on that same note, our writers choose what they write about. I don't. A lot of magazines have a set we're gonna we're gonna run these things because it's what's best for views. But most of our writers are not doing that. They're choosing whatever is passionate to them to write about. We're never going to get the same number of views as a YouTube channel, but it's not about the views. I would also say that our magazine for print media is pretty interactive. We have a lot of videos in the magazine because it's a virtual magazine. We have a lot more freedom for interactivity. We have like interactive quizzes. We use a lot of music. And even in the first couple of volumes, we had like a full text to speech integration. So you could listen back to the article with background music. It's kind of a great experience. And I would recommend you to look at the first 3 issues of the Aether Entertainer magazine if you want to check that out. Because listening to the article with the background music, it's not really like reading print media. It almost feels more like an audiobook. We didn't keep up with that because it's an incredible amount of work. But if I had the resources, that's the first thing I would bring back to the Aether Entertainer is the text to speech.
That's really interesting to me because it almost feels like you're redefining what print media and what a magazine can be. And I know that, that's not exactly the goal of Aether Entertainer, but it is really neat for me to see what feels like the evolution of a magazine that I would otherwise be holding in my hand.
I think it is one of our goals to make print media more engaging because we live in a time where print media is not as popular as it used to be, but I don't feel that it's dead. It's just different now. You know, it's just different. We have the capabilities to make it more fun. And just like how movies and stuff have evolved over time to have color and more special effects, print media should evolve in the same way.
When it comes to the magazine, your position is editor in chief. What all does that entail? And what's your creative process like for putting the magazine together?
Well, my job as editor in chief is I basically drive the ship. I also act as a safety net for the rest of the staff. So what that means is I do a little bit of everything. I can write, I edit, I also design the spreads myself. I have a specific process that I make sure that the staff are following, which includes deadlines. And my job is to make sure that we're releasing on a consistent schedule. That's really important when you're creating content and trying to get eyes. You want to have a reliable product. So a lot of my job is also marketing in a way, which I think I could improve on, but I'm the primary marketer for the magazine right now. The only thing I really don't have a hand in is the website management. I have a very consistent person who does that for me, fortunately. Everything else though, I have a management team. So I'm not doing all of the hats by myself. I think there's 4 of us who are doing all of the hats. So it's a tiered system. As far as the publishing process goes, everything happens in our Discord, the very same Discord that we release the magazines in. There's private staff channels in there. I'll create a channel for every upcoming magazine that we're planning, and the channels will go 3 months out. So right now we're in March. I have May magazine already being planned. We create threads for every article that we're planning in that magazine, and then the journalists choose their topics. The editors and designers that we have on staff will then look at the threads that were created and they'll decide if that project is something that they want to work on and they'll opt in. And so we start creating these mini teams that are working on certain content within these threads. And then that mini team brings the whole project to the design team, which then our web team puts it all together and puts it on the website.
That's awesome. I mean, just wow. I didn't expect to hear that you guys are already planning out May's magazine. I mean, that's great.
We plan so far in advance because we're not like a mainstream magazine. This is a community created content. So people on the magazine all have lives and jobs that they're working outside. We don't get paid for this. So we do work pretty far out to ensure that we can release on that schedule.
Now, I know this goes back to my previous question a little, but you've gotten some very big names in the 14 community to be in your magazine. Like we talked about before, musicians, content creators, voice actors, and actresses. That's incredible. Is there anyone that you've been like really shocked that agreed to an interview or anyone that you've just been kind of starstruck by?
I would say that I have been moderately starstruck by every single person that we put on the cover. And I haven't personally done all of those interviews. Uh, but I would say that I'm always shocked and grateful when there are popular members of the community that agree to be interviewed by us. But in particular, when we first landed the Saint of Briar, that was like a oh wow moment when I realized that this magazine is it's not just like this little project that I started as a card anymore. It's a community. This magazine belongs to the community now. And that moment also raised our confidence to start asking more big names and people who are more popular for interviews.
You guys don't just do interviews, though. In fact, Aether Entertainer isn't just a magazine. You also hold some very large scale in game events for the community. And I'm very curious, what how do you tie those into the magazine? How do you guys consider those large scale events to be part of Aether Entertainer's mission and goal?
So I'm going to go back to 2022 when we were a card Aether Entertainer. It was actually Sumira's idea that we should open a venue. And her idea was that we would open this reading cafe and we would promote our magazine at our own venue. I was very fortunate at the time to have a house, and I didn't want to give up my personal house to be a venue. So we opened up a cafe in my apartment and we posted it in the party finder. And within 1 hour, we capped the apartment the very first time we opened.
Oh,
So
wow.
there, from there, we knew that this venue was going to work. And we opened it up in my small. And then we, maybe 6 months later, opened up the venue in a medium, and it kept growing. And the more people that we covered in the magazine, especially venues, the more people that would come out to our events and the bigger community we would create with the people that we were publishing. Um, as it is now, we hold a large free company house on Dynamis, and our venue name is Aether Entertainer Cafe, or AE Cafe, and we hold events there quarterly. We used to hold them more frequently, but as the events started to scale, it made more sense with the workload to hold them quarterly. So now we have pretty big blowout events every quarter, I would say, and we put a lot of production and time into planning them. So they're much bigger than, I would say, like your average weekly venue opening. But we tie those into the magazine in that we release our magazine early at those events for people who show up. That's to help with attendance and to get people involved in like a social aspect of the game. A lot of the times we will ask the people that we've published about to come and attend these events. So like we'll try to bring in, if we write about a bard band, we'll hire that bard band to play at this event so you can read about them as you're watching them. And we try to kind of tie in the event as a showcase of maybe what is to either come in the magazine or what we've already talked about. And we also offer everything for free because it's supposed to be about giving back to the community. So you can come out and have a good time and it won't cost you a cent or a gil.
That is just so cool. I mean, excuse my fanboying, but I absolutely love what you guys do in terms of promoting the community and trying to give back to it. It's just so amazing to me. And having been to some of these events myself, they get quite the turnout. The last one was very busy. So I have to ask, what is it like on event day for you and the rest of the staff? Are you guys rushing around trying to keep everything in order, or are things pretty set in terms of pacing and who's taking care of what now?
I feel like it's definitely a controlled chaos. As I said, our events are quarterly, so we have a lot of time to plan. And just like how we plan the magazine so far out, I'm already working on an event that's happening in June. And it's because of the scale, and we just want everything to run smoothly. I'm kind of a little bit OCD when it comes to this type of thing, organization. So my ideal plan is for on event day, the staff only need to show up on time. There shouldn't really be any craziness happening before the event. Maybe a little bit on my end because I might be answering last minute questions, but my staff it should be pretty chill. Everything's meticulously planned. And it's not every time. Sometimes there's last minute cancellations, which I usually have some very flexible people who are willing to help out with. But the other thing that's super helpful with the events is I'm meticulous about our card. So our card now, which used to be the Aether Entertainer magazine card, that's the card that I have tied for the venue. It's the very same one. I kept the layout of the original Aether Entertainer magazine, or sorry, newspaper that we published under. That same layout is the layout that we use for our event cards now, as kind of like a touch to our roots. And I just make sure to put like too much information on that card. So that way, even if staff are a little bit confused, they can refer to the card themselves as well as the guests, and everything is there. So it's a little bit chaotic, but maybe only for the first hour or two when we start running the event because people are coming in and they have a lot of questions. But in the last 2 hours, we get to chill just like the guests do.
And I've noticed that as a compliment to all of your staff, you all do a fantastic job of interacting with the guests. You're not just there as overseers for the event, you're actively talking and shouting and really getting involved with the people attending.
Yeah, we try to, as that's kind of the point of the event is to interact with people. I really like getting feedback from people who are on the ground, like in the game, to hear what they like or disliked about the magazine. We also have a survey button in the magazine too. Just want to put that out there because I'm always open for feedback. So if you ever see me in game, like part of the events is so that I can get feedback from people who are reading our magazine in real time.
While we're talking about the events, I'd like to touch on something very personal to me as someone who is part of the roleplay community and is always trying to signal boost role playing in 14. I've noticed that alongside the main attractions you have at your events, you always have a separate area specifically for roleplay, which is huge to me. Not only because I had the privilege of getting to help with that, which I loved every minute of, but also because for a lot of events in game, it seems that it's usually divided between this event either is or is not a role play event, whereas you guys have made sure that there are spaces for role playing and non role playing and role play optional. What brought that about? What made you guys decide that you wanted to incorporate this role play space into your venues?
The ultimate reason that we created this space, well, I mean, I guess there's a lot of reasons. Firstly, we grew so much that now our events kind of run similar to like a large scale, like with a bunch of shouts and giveaways, and the chat goes very quickly. And it's not catering to our role play audience. And as I've mentioned, Aether Entertainer has a lot of roots in role play, but our venue's loud, it's busy, it's really active, and it's fun. But I started to learn last year that some of my older staff who were on board, I still have staff who were on board from the card Aether Entertainer, which was a specific in character publication. And they stayed on and they started expressing to me that our events were moving further away from the type of venues they like to go to, essentially. And I really wanted to cater back to them, and to the people who were originally reading our newspaper. I didn't want to lose that engagement. I wanted to include everybody. So on the first event of the year, we decided to open up a cantina, which is a new area meant for immersive RP. It's in FC Room 1 at our venue. And we've only had one opening so far, but from the feedback that I got, it was a really great experience. It's staffed by some of the Aether Entertainer staff who like to role play. Um, and then our other side is the Aether Entertainer Cafe, which is more for like bards and more hype, and we'll have special guests and things like that there. And they're attached to each other, so that if you wanted to experience both, you could.
So, after talking to you and hearing all about the magazine, would you be willing to give us a sneak peek of what's next? Like any guests that you can reveal for the next volume or any upcoming events you want to promote while you're here?
Yeah, absolutely. So this month we're hosting the Aether Entertainers fourth annual Spring Tea Festival on March 29th. We will be releasing our volume 15 at this event, which is featuring housing tour streamer Denmo McStronghuge. He's going to be on the cover, but we'll also have a piece about the popular mall venue that's on Primal, the Forum Shopping Center, as well as a review of Fish Fest. At that event, we're also going to be hosting our Battle of the Bards competition, which will be judged by two people that have been on the cover of Aether Entertainer magazine, Leonard Frey Folgen, who is a very popular bard in the community, and the voice actor of the cool Jaja, Javier Prusty. That should be pretty hype. We're going to be streaming it. Our streamer is Madam Sharky. She'll be streaming the whole event, so if you can't make it out, you should tune in. But other than that, we're going to be adding a couple of partner venues in the upcoming events. So starting in June, we're going to be opening up more free company rooms, and we're going to have a couple of resident venues come and offer services there. So I'm hoping to get, I won't name any names yet, but I have a couple. I have a nightclub that I'm talking to, and I have like a games venue that I'm talking to about adding to the venue. So I'm hoping to have a lot of new services for everyone. And of course, we're also hoping to get lots of great articles for the upcoming publications.
So it sounds like future Aether Entertainer events really are trying to cater to as many parts of the 14 community as possible.
Yeah, that's the idea. I would love to see a venue where we have unique offerings in the free company rooms for specific communities, and then everybody feed together towards the end of the night so that we could all just be one big community together at the end.
That is beautiful, and I can't express how much I love that. That is amazing. And of course, I'm going to be there because after saying how much I love this event, it'd be weird if I didn't show up.
Well,
But
definitely say hi.
but I am so excited to see what happens with Aether Entertainer both as a magazine and a venue in 2025. I think that for the community, there's going to be a ton of cool things going forward. Now, you've been kind enough to be here for 2 hours answering my questions, even though we had a bit of a late start for various reasons. So at this point, I want to give you a chance to ask me questions. So if you have any questions for me, I am totally open for answering them.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely do. And let me just start by saying that this is really always strange if I'm ever on this side of the interview because I'm typically the interviewer. So my first question is kind of in relation to being an interviewer. So you're a podcast, I'm a magazine. As a magazine, we're always searching for new leads and new people to feature. I was wondering, what persons of interest are on your radar for future guests for your show?
So there is a special guest that will be not on the next episode, but the episode after that. So May's episode of Coffee and Carbuncles, I am very excited to announce that we are going to have the German musician Happy Tunes, also known as Happy Tunes Shiva, on the podcast.
That's so cool.
I am so honored and thrilled. I was like, "Hey, would you be willing to do this podcast?" And he was so nice and was like, "Yeah, I'd love to. Let's do it."
That's awesome.
I don't know how many Happy Tunes performances you've seen.
I did see them at AetherCon.
Yes. And the way Happy Tunes performs, especially the AetherCon performance last year, just blows me away. The stuff that he's able to make these characters do in 14 and the coordination with the outfits and the music. And so I am really looking forward to that. Also, in regards to it feels weird being interviewed when you're an interviewer. Funny enough, that's actually what I said at the start of my interview for the Aether Entertainer.
Definitely does. And when you said that, I was like, oh God, I say that at every interview I ever have to. That's like my lead in, like, just so you know, I'm uncomfortable being interviewed because I asked the question. But anyway, yeah,
Right? It feels kind of odd having the tables turned on you.
yeah. It's that way when I go to the doctor's office too.
Oh gosh, is it?
Oh yeah, it's so weird, like having a nurse when you're the nurse, or it's weird having somebody else doing your job for you. Strange.
I
Um,
bet. Do you ever find yourself like critiquing the job the nurse is doing, or are you just like stop that?
well, I don't want to out myself, but like, yeah, I mean, everywhere we go, it's more with my family. Like if my boyfriend and I go to his doctor's appointment and they're doing something like sideways, then I'll be like, hey, she sucks or whatever. And I okay, next. I did want to ask you one more question, which is the question that we have asked most people who have been on the cover of our magazine, and it's the question, the like telltale oldest question of all time, and your answer is very very important. Also, we're keeping statistics. Is
Oh,
a is a
okay.
hot dog a sandwich?
100% yes.
Ooh, that's an interesting take. I don't know if that's the popular take.
I don't
Why?
care. So so here's my argument to that is I I may have a very loose definition of a sandwich, but in my opinion, if I were to define a sandwich, it would be basically taking two similar objects. Now, whether that's two pieces of fried chicken or two pieces of like rye bread or two halves of a bun, whatever. Two similar objects. Putting food between those objects and then having it be something that you consume with your hands. So for instance, if someone had a very big piece of ravioli, like a turkey club sized piece of ravioli, and they were holding it in their hands and eating it, I would be like, okay, so the ravioli is now a sandwich. I consider tacos to be a sandwich. I consider hot dogs to be a sandwich. Now my definition of a sandwich is obviously quite a bit more broad than others, but that's where I'm at with that question.
You're making illegal sandwiches.
I mean,
I I mean that's fair. That's fair. I actually think that statistic wise, and don't quote me because I want to publish these statistics at some point in the magazine. But I think we're close to 50-50 on the hot dog question.
I'll be honest, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to judge someone's sandwich. I'm going to try and not, but obviously, internal judging happens. Like for instance, if someone comes to me and they're like, "So I put some slices of lettuce between two hot dogs and then ate it." I'd be like, "Well,
It's a wrap.
I'm I'm willing to consider that a sandwich, but that doesn't mean I don't think it's an odd choice for a sandwich."
That sounds horrible.
It does, and no one has ever done that, and I hopefully no one ever will. I'm sorry if I just gave people ideas, but but that's where I'm at in regards to what I would call a sandwich and what I would not. Now, this obviously raises the question, so if someone took a bunch of little pieces of ravioli, held them in their hand, and then ate them, would I consider that a bunch of little sandwiches? And the answer is maybe. Let's not get too crazy. But in regards to a hot dog, I would definitely classify a hot dog as a sandwich. Yes.
Okay. I'll mark that down in the statistics.
Is there going to be a statistic on is a very very big piece of ravioli a sandwich?
You will add that like as a bonus fact. Bonus thought bean, you know.
Would you consider what would you consider a sandwich and what isn't?
I guess I have, I've never been asked the question back. So I definitely have a controversial opinion about this compared to some other people who work at the Aether Entertainer. And just so you know, they're not on this podcast right now. So my definition is that a hot dog is not a sandwich. It's not a sandwich, Joseph. Anyway, so
Elaborate.
the it's on a bun. It needs to have two pieces of bread with something in between. Is it
So
two tortillas a sandwich? No, that's a quesadilla. Okay.
now see,
I
I would consider a quesadilla a sandwich is the thing. So hold on though. Hold on. So
A hot dog
you
is a hot dog. Yeah.
I feel like we could add an extra hour to this podcast just debating on our
Like
definitions of
like
sandwich.
at best, a hot dog is an open face sandwich, and you have to specify because it's not a traditional sandwich. It's not a sandwich.
You know what? For
Yeah,
for
like
the
a
sake of keeping the peace, I am willing to meet you halfway here. We can compromise and call a hot dog an open face sandwich. I am willing to take that step if you are.
Okay, but you have to specify every time.
Every
It's
time.
a face.
All right. From now on, we have decided. And like with the do medics always play healers in 14, if you have takes on this, by all means, leave a comment, guys. But I think that we, in terms of Vendetta and I, are going to end the interview here. Thank you so much for spending these 2 hours with me, and I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been a good time. Thanks for having me on.
I look forward to the next event, as well as the next volume of the magazine. And I also look forward to hopefully speaking with you at Gateway Fate later this year.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll take some pictures and post that all up.
I would love that. I hope you have a great day, Vendetta. I'll catch you later.
See you.
Bye. Before I get back in character, I just want to say thank you for tuning in to the first episode of Season 3 of Coffee and Carbuncles. I am very excited for this season. I've been working on a lot of the audio quality. Also, my friend Nadidah was kind enough to make music just for this podcast, so I am so thankful for that. I also wanted to say that for those listening on any podcast hosting platform, please go check out my YouTube channel as well. If you are listening to this in podcast form, it probably looks like this is my first post in about 4 months. But actually, I've been hard at work over on YouTube, working on several side projects, and I'd love if you check those out as well. From YouTube shorts to interviews about various jobs in 14 to lore videos, I'm trying to expand my YouTube content quite a bit this year, so I hope you'll check that out when you get the chance. Alright, now let's properly end this episode. So, how are you feeling after hearing all that? When I first heard of the Aether Entertainer magazine, I was so elated. While they only started last year, they have really hit the ground running, and I think they will continue to bring a lot of positivity to our community. I hope you will check out their next edition or even come to their next event. Well, you appear to have finished your drink, and I've certainly kept you here long enough. So I'll see you again next time, dear friend, with a warm drink and, of course, wonderful guests. Take care.